What's up, wrestling fans? It is time for another edition of the Voice of Wrestling right here at voiceofwrestling.net. Of course, live on our YouTube, youtube.com/VOW radio. And I'm your host, Chris Cash, alongside my good buddy, Nick Paglino over there in, where are you? New York. New York City. As if I haven't said that enough. From New York City, Nick Paglino, of course, senior editor at ProWrestling.com, a partner of ours as well. Make sure you check out ProWrestling.com for all your pro wrestling news, and active over there all the time, checking it out. In fact, I'm over there today making sure, because this week's been crazy, Nick. I haven't really had the opportunity to figure out what the hell's going on. I watched Raw last week, haven't been able to figure out exactly. I know someone got arrested. I think he's rich, and he'll be fine. But we do have a lot going on in the world of professional wrestling. Some things that I think some people expected to happen, and then a couple of other things that I think maybe people, maybe fans in the know, thought WWE was going to take a little bit different direction. And I think we've talked enough about Finn Balor, Nick, but I think there was a lot of fans and a lot of people that maybe thought Finn Balor would be pushed in a sense that he would be a legitimate contender for even Brock Lesnar. And I think a lot of people have fallen off of that at this point, given the way they're treating him on Raw. Recently, it doesn't seem like that's anywhere near in the cards. In fact, we just found out Kane and Braun Strowman, they are now number one. They're going to be in a number one contenders match. And the winner of that will go on to face Brock Lesnar at the Rumble. So plenty to talk about. And of course, David Chisholm, my good buddy, wants us to talk about The Undertaker, and there's been some sightings of him and maybe what's going to happen, obviously, with his annual appearance at WWE, what they might do with him at WrestleMania. So we've got plenty to talk about. But, Nick, first and foremost, how was your week, brother?
Good. Like you said, busy week. A lot sort of took place in the wrestling world and outside of the wrestling world, too.
There's some things going on.
Maybe. There was a terrorist attempted bombing earlier today in Times Square. And for those of you who know, I'm not too far from Times Square, so that was a bit scary, but minimal damage, and they got the guy. So so that was the big news of today. But a lot took place in wrestling, and it looks like now, we stand to see a lot happening on Raw tonight, and definitely some changes with the arrest of Rich Swann, which took place over the weekend.
Well, and Nick, give us some of the details, obviously. We know that he's been suspended indefinitely, which is a pretty common reaction by a company anytime an employee, a superstar, whatever the case may be, is accused of this. I mean, at this point, Nick, you mentioned the terrorist attacks. I think social media allows people, because I'm not sure millennials and younger age people were probably following news, and as much as they are now in the past 5-6 years. Now we see every movement for the most part, because somebody in our friends, family, on Facebook, whatever the case, in our social circles, they're going to be putting these things over. I know this is semi-parallel to maybe our conversation, and it's a little bit off base, but at the same time, it is stuff that we discuss here on VLW always. Whatever the hell's on our mind, we're going to talk about. But, when you think about social media these days and how open everything is, with Facebook, of course, being probably the leader in these types of things, even Twitter, obviously, celebrities voicing their opinions, you can't get away from the news. Whereas back in the day, it was pretty easy to stay away from that. Now, women, with everything that's going on, with kind of the movement for women to have fair treatment and not putting up with abuse any longer and stuff like that, it was inevitable at this point that if you're in a situation in any kind, whether you're guilty, innocent, it doesn't matter. You're going to be pretty much found guilty by your employer, probably, at least in the forefront, before you're even, given the opportunity to explain yourself. They have to take immediate actions at this point to make sure they're on the front side of it, and they're not employing a guy, giving him a stage, giving him a push for that matter, until they find out 100% that he is, without a question, not at fault. And it's unfortunate for anybody in a situation like this, and I don't know the details, really, before I even jump into any type of opinionated part of this, Nick, talk about what we do know about Rich Swann and the incident that has happened, and of course him being arrested. With obviously whatever happened between him and his wife.
Well, it did take place on Saturday night. He was arrested on charges of domestic battery and false imprisonment. So the situation involved himself and his wife, whose name is Verona Riggs, and she actually is a wrestler who wrestles on the independent scene as Sue Young. And according to the Gainesville Police Department, what we know now is that they were engaged in some kind of an argument. I think it stemmed from the fact that she had his wife had just competed in a match, an indie match, and he was criticizing the match and her performance, and that led to an argument. He started getting angry with her. She got angry with him. The victim then, in the case, his wife here reportedly got scared that the argument was going to escalate, and this all took place in their car. And she got out of the car in sort of the middle of traffic. She jumped out of the car, and then Swann chased after her, yelling after her to get back into the car. He then apparently grabbed her by the arm and apparently around the neck. And he kind of put her in a headlock, or reportedly looked from witnesses claim that it looked to be sort of like a headlock, and he dragged her back to the vehicle, and she was screaming for help. And there were witnesses that were, reportedly claiming that they overheard her screaming for help. So, of course, he was arrested. He was actually released from jail over the weekend. And now it's just a waiting game, and like you said, WWE, in accordance with their domestic abuse policies, the domestic violence policies that they have in place, he has to be suspended indefinitely until this case is closed. And it'll really just go in one of two ways, I mean, if he is convicted,
he's gone
on any of these charges, he could face jail time. So of course, if he goes to jail, his WWE career would be over.
If he's found guilty at this point, I think he's out regardless. As far as to be,
I think he's out regardless. I mean, if he's found guilty, even if he doesn't go to jail,
right?
I think a guy like Rich Swann is definitely, given the spot that he's in WWE. If this were a Roman Reigns or a Triple H or a John Cena, I mean, even a guy like that, I don't think might be able to sneak by. But that's a top guy. You're talking about a Rich Swann. He's a cruiserweight. He's a very disposable talent for WWE. So, I really think the only way he returns to WWE is if the charges are completely dropped and he is 100% vindicated or acquitted.
Now, what are they doing, Nick, as far as that goes with? And I was showing everybody the article, the recent article on ProWrestling.com, as far as the kind of the plans potentially being scrapped altogether. As far as obviously he was set to face off against Drew Gulak for the chance to face.
That is the precarious position that WWE is in right now, which is that it just coincidentally happens to be at a time where this is taking place, for which Rich Swann is. He hadn't been really given much of a push in WWE as of late, and now here he is getting one. And it's going to be Rich Swann versus Drew Gulak tonight, with the winner going on to face Enzo Amore for the Cruiserweight title. And interestingly, WWE has now, as of today, and since the arrest happened, they've made absolutely no mention of the Cruiserweight title plan. So obviously the match is scrapped. Rich Swann is suspended indefinitely, so we don't know how they're going to address this situation and what's going to happen. My guess is you could just see Drew Gulak named the number one contender, and that could set up issues between him and Enzo, because of course they're on the same side in the Zo Train faction. They could go that direction, or they could just name a replacement for Rich Swann. But yeah, I don't, if I had to guess, I'd say things aren't looking too good for him, and I would agree with you, Chris. I think if he's found guilty of anything, regardless of whether or not he goes to jail, I would probably think he would be done in WWE.
So we'll obviously keep following that, and tonight will give us a pretty telltale sign of how they are going to proceed with the Cruiserweight championship angle, and of course Enzo Amore and what he's going to end up, who he's going to end up facing, if they're going to maybe keep going with the kind of the storyline of having two people face off with a chance to face him, or if they're just going to go straight to Drew Gulak. But obviously, want to move on as well to something else that we found out now that does affect Raw tonight, and of course it affects Brock Lesnar's title, and the fact that Braun Strowman and Kane actually are going to end up having a match tonight, and the winner of that will then go on to face Brock Lesnar for the Universal title. First and foremost, Nick, as I'm kind of showing everybody the article, are you surprised by this? Because you and I talked last week, and I don't think this was on the table. It was really not something that any of us expected. I mean, we talked about the idea of Brock and Strowman. That made a lot of sense, but we didn't know exactly when they might want to go in that direction at this point. So are you a little shocked by this? Is this coming out of left field for you, or is it something that they really just need somebody for Brock Lesnar that's legitimate? Of course,
Yeah.
Royal Rumble, massive pay-per-view, so of course that part makes sense. Are you really surprised by this?
I guess I am and I'm not. I'm surprised all of a sudden this is the match that they're making the number one contender match. I don't really know aside from these two guys beating each other up, I get Braun Strowman as a viable number one contender. Kane, I don't really understand where that's coming from. And certainly I don't see this match being Brock Lesnar versus Kane at the Royal Rumble. My prediction here is Braun Strowman wins, goes on to face Brock Lesnar, and then at the Royal Rumble, his WrestleMania opponent costs him the match. So if it's, if they're going down the road of Triple H versus Braun Strowman at WrestleMania, that's when you could see Triple H interfering potentially. And that, would make sense because it all stems from what happened at Survivor Series. So I could see that. That would be my guess as to how this all plays out. And then it really basically solves sort of all of the issues here. It puts Braun Strowman in a match that is not the Royal Rumble match. So you don't have to worry about Braun Strowman being eliminated from the Royal Rumble. So he looks strong there because he won't be competing in the Royal Rumble. Well, we assume he's not competing in the Royal Rumble match. It has happened in the past where someone who challenges for the title in a singles match then ends up also competing in the Royal Rumble match. Right. But my guess would be he's kept out of that match, so it protects him from having to lose that match and get eliminated from the Royal Rumble match. Then with Triple H getting involved, he doesn't have to lose clean to Brock Lesnar, and it gets Brock Lesnar on that show, and it sets up future plans for Braun Strowman at WrestleMania. So I think it kind of achieves everything that WWE wants because, at last word, WWE was very high on Braun Strowman looking very strong and being one of those top baby faces heading into WrestleMania. So certainly, I would think that role will continue for him at Royal Rumble, and I don't see a clean loss to Brock Lesnar, especially since he already had one to Brock Lesnar a couple of months ago for the title.
What are the chances at this point, Nick, in your mind, that Braun wins that match and heads on as the champion to WrestleMania? At this point, now Roman could still face Brock, but I don't think that's the direction. I think the title is going to be involved in Roman's match at WrestleMania one way or another. So I guess my question to you is it still on the table 100% at this point that Brock is going to face Roman Reigns with the championship on the line, or could Braun ultimately switch places at this point with Brock? They've built Braun up to such a degree now that he's ultimately another Brock Lesnar. And in fact, so more so in my mind that he's got a lot more longevity than Brock Lesnar. So you highlight two of your guys that are actually going to be around after WrestleMania. If Braun has the same effect as Brock Lesnar in that regard, and you still have Brock on the card, at this point, could that be something that WWE is considering?
I don't think so. It's a possibility, but I think WWE still firmly believes Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, that's the main event. Just if you look at the way Brock Lesnar's been booked all year, and typically the way Brock Lesnar is booked, it's he is this guy that is unstoppable,
Sure.
and there's only going to be one guy out there that can stop him. And, it could be a situation where, maybe they want Braun. Maybe they're going to put all their eggs in the basket of Braun if he continues getting a really great babyface reaction. I could see that happening before I would ever see, a Braun Reigns match at WrestleMania. I still think Brock Lesnar is being positioned as that guy that is going to be that unstoppable champion heading into WrestleMania, and then someone like Roman Reigns is going to be the guy.
All right, so then what do you do with Braun then for WrestleMania at this point? I mean, where does Braun Strowman go? Is it Triple H?
Well, by all accounts, it's Triple H.
Yeah. I mean, because they still haven't really gotten back to that. Obviously, since the last pay-per-view, they really haven't gone down that road. It certainly seems like that's still on the agenda at some point in the future. So this is just an ability to, hey, let's go ahead and get Brock over someone like Braun at the Rumble, which would help Brock at this point, obviously, with their, with his dealings in the past. I mean, Braun went toe-to-toe with him, obviously, and they've built Braun up to be such a beast. So now let's give Brock kind of that clean win, a hard-fought win, maybe not even clean, and it still comes out both. But I think for you to set Brock Lesnar, if that's the case, if that's the guy that ultimately is putting over Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, you need him at his strongest, going over Braun Strowman at this point, but you've got to protect Braun as well. And I really hope this isn't the end of the road for Braun as far as the massive push.
Yeah, and I think that's why, sort of the best way, and typically the way WWE does it is, they're going to have that interference angle there. This way, it keeps the title on Brock. Brock still looks strong. Both guys can look really strong in that match, and you can really build that to where Braun Strowman maybe even looks like he's going to beat Lesnar, and then Triple H screws it.
Sure.
And then you're setting that up. You've got Braun looking really solid. And then you've got Braun and Roman Reigns as your two top baby faces heading into New Orleans and WrestleMania.
So I think it's interesting, and I think that's going to be a unique. So now that Braun, if that's the case, Nick, is out of the Rumble, where does it stand for the Rumble? And assuming again that some fluke doesn't happen in the sense that he comes back and he does it, but where does that open it up for Roman? I mean, is that too clear? I just don't see that happening. I mean, at this point, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't either. I mean, like we said before, WWE did that once with Roman Reigns winning the Rumble in Philadelphia. He got a horrible reaction.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would get it would be an even more stifling reaction. Now, that would be a really big test. I think
that's why we're coming to the point now where SmackDown's probably the winner's coming from SmackDown.
I would say the winner's coming from SmackDown. Yes, absolutely.
So you could set up Roman with them another way.
Opportunities after the Royal Rumble because you still have another Raw and another SmackDown pay-per-view following the Royal Rumble where you can always get that number one contender to the other title. So I would think that goes to SmackDown. But if WWE did pull that trigger and they had Roman Reigns winning the Royal Rumble match in Philadelphia, I think it would truly mean that WWE is embracing the mixed reaction that Roman Reigns gets. They're acknowledging it. He acknowledges it in interviews. They acknowledged it in that Straight to the Source network show that they just premiered last week that Corey Graves hosted. He talked about it. So, WWE acknowledges that he's a polarizing guy, like John Cena.
Yeah, but set the stage for this, Nick. Rumble really looks bad at this point on paper. If you're going into it with Braun versus Brock, and then you've got Roman announce that he's in the Rumble, I mean, you're basically foreshadowing. I mean, you're giving it away at that point, and it would make it very difficult unless they threw some curveballs in there, which just doesn't make sense for what they're doing. But if Roman enters the Rumble, you've got that. I mean, to me, that takes away from my enjoyment or my anticipation for Rumble, because it just seems like it would be a foregone conclusion at that point. Now, I may watch with suspense and to the effect that maybe they'll surprise me, but then if at the end of the pay-per-view everything lines up the exact way we expect it to line up, I'm pissed off.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily know. I mean, look, you've got, look, Randy Orton won the Royal Rumble last year, and he was not involved. And then, obviously Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, they were involved in that big title match, the Universal title match at WrestleMania. So I don't necessarily think that Roman Reigns announcing he will be in the Royal Rumble match is a foreshadow. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's winning. I mean, because again, remember, there's a lot of things. There is the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, which is taking place in February.
So your alternative? Your alternative is for Roman to go over the top rope. The guy they're building to be the guy is going to go over the top rope.
Remember, they could do that in so many different ways, though. Roman does not have to be eliminated, in the traditional sense, where someone comes in and picks him up and throws him out.
But how many times did they do that with John Cena? How many times did they do that with John Cena?
Do what?
I mean, use any other method of getting him over the top rope in a Rumble. Yeah, let's use 15 guys. That never happened because John Cena would take the 15 guys and throw them all over at once. I mean, obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but to me, when they built, and I've seen the same signs, the same type of trends with Roman Reigns, which I think they're trying to kind of reverse engineer a little bit and just start going away from that in the sense of we're making him look way too much like John Cena, the Superman type of crap. So let's not go that way as much. But that's what they did with John Cena. I mean, John Cena, when he was in the Rumble, he generally won.
Well, he's been eliminated from Rumbles too. I mean,
but not in the beginning of his career.
He's going to be returning.
Yeah, that's true.
But I really don't. I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's that foregone conclusion that Roman Reigns wins. I think there's just, obviously if they want to set something up for him at Elimination Chamber, if they want to set up a match for him at Elimination Chamber, then they could very simply have someone who, they could do that bit where someone gets eliminated and then they're pissed off and they come, and I always hate it. It's one of my least favorite storylines or recurring angles that WWE will do is when someone gets eliminated from the Rumble and they get pissed off and they go back into the ring and eliminate a guy who's in the match. Well, how does that elimination count? If you've already been disqualified from the match and you're out, how can you come back into the match and eliminate a guy? I hate that.
Yep.
They've done that before. They could do it again. They could have, he could get eliminated by Samoa Joe could get eliminated, then Samoa Joe goes nuts, and he grabs a chair on the outside. He comes in, he smashes Roman Reigns in the chair a billion times and throws him out, and the match sets up Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe at the next pay-per-view because you still have time.
Sure.
But again, you'll then have to figure out when you are going to establish Roman Reigns as the number one contender, and as we talked about before, as we reported on ProWrestling.com, that could be the Elimination Chamber. The winner of that then could go on to face Brock Lesnar for the title if a SmackDown guy wins. And if I had to choose right now, I'd say that's probably what's most likely going to happen.
Well, and also, I mean, unless I'm completely missing something at this point, it could be an opportunity because, I mean, there's several guys on Raw at this point that they're trying to keep strong. And I think that Samoa Joe is actually still one of them. So is Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe, because we heard that tonight, in fact, in that same deal, I believe it's Cesaro that's going to be taking on Roman Reigns tonight in the kind of IC title open challenge. And so if that's the case, Nick, you still are pushing off Samoa Joe and Roman Reigns. I mean, that's what they're wanting. They're wanting that to be the big build. So to me, it makes sense that Samoa Joe's the guy to take the Intercontinental title off of Roman Reigns. Does that happen at the Rumble in your mind? And you keep both of them out of the Rumble?
That could happen, and I'll, to be honest with you, I don't think it's a bad idea, because if WWE really wants to protect Roman Reigns as a top babyface,
sure,
and they really want those cheers,
yeah,
they've got to figure out a creative way of booking him in Philadelphia.
right,
Because that Philadelphia crowd is going to eat him alive.
yeah,
And, maybe I think, to your point, I think maybe the best plan or the best idea would be to have Roman Reigns versus Joe in Philadelphia. Joe wins the title, in some fashion. It could be some screwball fashion. He's probably going to get a pop from the crowd, so it's difficult. I think WWE, though, at the end of the day, is probably just going to embrace the fact that, hey, you know what? Whatever reaction he gets. We're just not going to have him win the Royal Rumble, because that would be, that's sort of how you end the night. It's the big reveal of the night, who wins the Royal Rumble. If you do that again with Roman Reigns in Philadelphia, I mean, they'll burn the building down. It could be fun to watch.
No, I agree with you. I think, and I'm sorry guys for having that camera shot on me for 2 minutes when I wasn't even talking, but that's what happens. Nick, I'm very curious. I'm really interested now with all the dynamics of everything, and I like this. I like the fact that guys like Samoa Joe, Roman Reigns, almost everybody but Finn Balor is getting pushed well and trying to be protected in some form or fashion. But in the end, obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize this, set up the pieces for Rumble. It really doesn't look like the only thing that I dislike is that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of direction for them to go in. I mean, it really seems like the stage is being set for very particular matches. We are very aware of those particular matches, and it seems like a very straight line from here to WrestleMania at this point, at least for your top contenders. It does open the door, though, for the Rumble, obviously, and what could happen at the Rumble. And so another thing that I wanted to kind of get into, of course, then we'll talk a little bit about the Undertaker and some plans. I mean, this is the time of year that obviously we start anticipating his return. Normally, it's not until the Rumble or after, but in some form or fashion, he starts deciding that he's going to come out and call out his next opponent, of course, and I assume that is going to happen this year as well. It just seems like that's another inevitable thing that we're going to be seeing another Undertaker match. But Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, and I guess my main question to you about this particular topic at this point, Nick, is what do you think of Bray Wyatt being the guy that's kind of that first story with Matt Hardy and this new Woken gimmick? It's very obvious they're going this direction now. Bray has been lost in the shuffle. And again, it happens to so many guys with potential, Nick. I mean, it really does. Every year, you're going to have 2 or 3 guys that were on the verge of a push, that were being presented very, very strong for a good portion of time. Bray was there for a while, a couple years back. Now he's kind of taken that back seat. Obviously Seth Rollins is another guy that's taken that back seat. He's still pushed in a lot of good stories, but in the end, he's not where he was, obviously, when they were branding him the guy. So Bray Wyatt, though, is still somebody with a ton of potential. He's a great guy to have on your program week in and week out. You've got him to deliver kind of that unique style that he really can deliver. But what do you think about, because you assume at this point Matt Hardy, again, the only thing that could derail him, Nick, in my mind, is the fans just completely crapping on it, and the only way they crap on it is by being silent. If they go crazy with the deletion and this gimmick the way that they did at TNA, then by far they're going to push it for a little while. At least Bray Wyatt will be the first victim, and I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about that. So my question to you, what do you think? I mean, what do you think about Wyatt Hardy? They're clearly setting that up. I don't know how long it'll last, but that's obviously the first place they're going with it.
Well, I think there's sort of good and bad here. There's positive and negative. Starting with the good, I thought the debut of the character was great. I thought that video segment was awesome. It was hilarious. It was interesting because, and I know I said I didn't like this when it was in Impact, but one of the reasons why I didn't like it, and I thought about this after I made those comments on the show last week, one of the reasons why is because it dominated all of Impact. You know, this was full 2-hour episodes of Impact where Matt Hardy's digging graves in his backyard and they're having all these weird matches and the Vanguard one is firing missiles at people. That was too much for me, you know. I think the way WWE is going to use it, of course, you're not going to have 3 hours of woken Matt Hardy, so it won't be overkill in that sense. You know, giving it one segment of a show, a 2-hour, 3-hour show, that's fine, you know. And I really liked what they did on Raw with it. I thought it was hilarious. And did you watch the 10-hour video that they released?
Yes.
It's amazing. It's just 10 hours of Matt Hardy laughing. It's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? And I think the headline was like, woken Matt Hardy laughs for 10 straight hours.
Right.
I mean, it's absurd, you know, but I think in a creative, funny way. And you know, we reported last week that Vince McMahon is a big proponent of this gimmick. Apparently, you know, Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated is the one that broke the story and said that, you know, sources were claiming Matt was talking to Vince about the ideas that he had for the character, and Vince was, quote unquote, eating it up. He loved it. He's giving Matt a lot of creative freedom. So that's all great news. I think if all of those things do happen, if it really does play out that way, if Vince does give him that creative freedom, I think we could see some really great things come of this gimmick. Now, at the expense of Bray Wyatt, that's the problem that I have. But you know what? You know, with the expression, what is it? Whose Cheerios did Bray Wyatt piss in? You know, somebody back there in WWE doesn't like the guy, and they're just not giving him the push that he deserves. You know, this is a guy that just consistently loses the big match. You know, it was interesting because right around this time last year, heading into WrestleMania, Bray Wyatt actually won the championship, you know? And you know, and that's not happening anymore, you know? And so I don't like the fact that this is all going to come at the expense of Bray Wyatt, even though this will probably be very entertaining.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that at the end of the day, Bray. I say that I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because personally, I think Bray Wyatt is a guy that he really is kind of an elevator. And when I say that, I mean a guy that elevates others right now. At this point in his career, the back and forth that you're going to have with Matt Hardy, I think is going to be very, very good. I expect that, obviously. And I think that, you know, it's going to be an interesting back and forth between these guys, because look, Matt Hardy needs somebody that he can actually work with, that kind of the back and forth between these types of characters, between Matt's type of character is something that, you know, very few guys are really going to have the opportunity to do that. I mean, in the end, very few characters can have the back and forth as far as the angles and everything that you really require with a gimmick, trying to get Matt Hardy's gimmick over in the very beginning. I like the idea. And all the pros that you mentioned, Nick, I think that's similar. Like, again, I love the idea of these two guys working together for those particular reasons. I'm at a point, though, now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think from a creative standpoint, it'll be great. The two of them will be great. Bray's always great. I mean, I love Wyatt. You know, that guy, he will bring his A game, and I think we're going to see some really fun, entertaining stuff, because even with that video they did last week, it told you sort of right off the bat that they're going to approach this from probably a bit more of a lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek comedy standpoint than they are a serious thing. You know, this isn't going to be, you know, serious, dramatic, woken Matt Hardy. They're going to take a humorous approach to it, and it certainly was very funny, especially at the end when they were both laughing and it was cutting back and forth wildly.
I think the deal with Bray Wyatt, and Nick, I guess my question to you and to the people that are I might put this as a poll question up on VLW at some point. I'm just kind of curious to, you know, why Bray Wyatt is where he's at. And my personal thought is not necessarily backstage heat. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that WWE I mean, just when you think about their history, when you think about the guys on top, I don't know that WWE knows what to do with a guy like Bray Wyatt as far as him being on top for very long. Again, Undertaker, if he had debuted at this point, would he be the big star? I mean, things were different, obviously, 20, 30 years ago than they are now. I don't know that the WWE brass at this point understand a character and what to do with him creatively on top of their company for a long period of time. Keep in mind, they gave Bray Wyatt a pretty lengthy run at the top. I mean, somewhere near the top or at the top. I mean, I feel like they've given him his just due, and now he's falling back down into kind of where they feel more comfortable using him as an elevation type guy for other people, someone that can always go out there and put on some good stories, some good matches, and obviously some good back and forth as far as the promos and everything. But I don't know that we're going to see Bray Wyatt very often, if ever again, truly make another major run at the top. I just don't know that they see that in him. I don't know that it has anything to do with backstage heat. I just think and I don't know that I feel that bad about it, to be honest. I mean, Nick, let me ask you a question. When they did kind of put him over, position him, and of course the fans were even more behind him back then. He was some of the most creative promos we had ever seen in our lives. Everybody was giving him all the props. Once he got there, though, Nick, and once the shtick kind of got old, I mean, to the point of we at least were familiar with it. It wasn't every week us talking about how amazing Bray Wyatt's promos were. It was more starting the other turn of let's critique a little bit here and there about how he could have maybe add more meat to the bones instead of all the cryptic crap that he continuously does. That was all fun in the beginning, but now you really gotta kind of get into the storyline progression and actually say things that make sense to people so they understand what the hell you're talking about. Little things like that. Once WWE gave him that big push, Nick, I'm kind of curious. I mean, did you love it? Did you think that he was a guy that you could get behind as a number one or number two guy of the company? Because I just don't know that I did. And so for me, using him in the position that they are now, it really might be where he's at, man. It might be where he needs to be. I don't mind it.
Yeah, it could be argued that. I could understand that. And I think I'm sure you're not the only person who believes that, but I think the general consensus was that when Wyatt was sort of at his best and he was being pushed as a top guy, I think people felt he belonged there. And I believe that he did. I think there's so much more you could have done with this.
That is true. That is true. A lot more they could have done. They could have gone a lot darker, Nick. They could have gone a lot darker.
But see, I was just going to say, that's the problem, though, is that, again, with WWE working in a PG confine and, them being family entertainment, I mean, my God, I would have loved to have seen them, kidnapping WWE stars and brainwashing them into the Wyatt family and the Wyatt family's growing. And, you've got maybe 4 or 5 guys, 6 guys in the Wyatt family. And then maybe you introduce, I mean, even Sister Abigail. Well, Sister Abigail could have been an amazing alter ego for Bray Wyatt. That could have been, I mean, when have you ever seen that in pro wrestling where a wrestler has an alter ego that is a female, a male wrestler has a female alter ego?
Sure.
That is, and then it comes out and you could have done a whole backstory as to why he's schizophrenic and he's I mean, there's just so much they could have done. And
I promise that could
I would have loved to have been able to sit in on creative meetings where you talk about what do you do with the Sister Abigail character with the idea being that it's all in his mind.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought up the creative meetings because I think that's where the problem is. First and foremost, we know that his storyline and his gimmick, the storylines that he could have had, the gimmick that he did, the promos, and of course Sister Abigail and the potential, that was all pretty something special. However, here's the problem with it. To me, for that character, Bray Wyatt is he knows more about it than the writers do. So as far as creative meetings, there's really not meetings, and that might be kind of where any heat might stem from, or the fact that WWE isn't pushing him the way that he could have been pushed, is because at the end of the day, they like the control too much. They don't like giving up that creative control to guys that really aren't in the position to earn it yet. And I don't think that Bray Wyatt truly was there once they were really giving him the push. So now he's regressed backwards, and it's a little bit too late to keep it going. To me, he was the only guy that could have controlled. They had to give him the creative freedom, and they probably weren't willing to do it 100%. Promo-wise, sure, say all your gibberish. We can't write that for you. But creatively, they're not smart enough. At the end of the day, Nick, they're not smart enough to be writing for his character, and they demand that control, weren't willing to give it up. And so in the end, you're left with a product that's not where it could have been. And I think Bray, that's unfortunate for a guy like Bray, because if they don't ever give that back to him and say, all right, let's freshen up your gimmick, let's give you the ability to go where you want to go with it, you know, I mean, and why they can't do that with characters that are like his, that it's not the run of the mill, a little easier to understand, a little more typical pop culture. Yeah, let's get, you know, we can write for that. You and I could write for that, Nick. I could not even comprehend what goes through Bray Wyatt's mind when he thinks of what his character should and should not do. Yeah. I wouldn't ever think to be like, you know what? I can write for you. No, I can't, because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do typical bullshit, which is what we're getting from Bray Wyatt right now. All right, yeah, let's set you up with Matt Hardy, and you guys kind of have some evil, dark shit. That's on you, but let's do that. That's what you would be getting, and that's what you're getting now. And unless they give him 100% creative control on where it goes and just kind of, hey, you give us ideas, we'll say yes or no, let's go, and take him to that level. I mean, that's the type of stuff that, again, I wish, Nick, you and I wish fans could see a little bit of the glimpse, more so of the creative stuff, to find out why you don't see guys, you know, being taken where they could go. I mean, what is the bottleneck back there that doesn't allow someone like Bray Wyatt to truly get back to where he was when they first started pushing him? Because right now it's just a little bit bland, and so you do have him basically be like, all right, Bray, you're the perfect guy to put over Matt Hardy in his new gimmick, and he should not be that guy. I'm not saying he should be on top. I'm not saying he should be on top, but I'm not saying he should be where he is right now. So before we wrap up, though, I want to talk about this DL Chiz. He should be returning next week with his thoughts in DL Dishes, that segment. However, he wanted us to talk a little bit about The Undertaker, Nick, and I think it's appropriate at this point. We're going to be probably getting into some year-end stuff, might be taking some time off for holidays, so we don't have a lot of time before the new year hits and we start talking about The Undertaker, his return, and what's going to happen, obviously, going forward and where he's going to be. First and foremost, yes or no, Nick, does Undertaker have a match at WrestleMania?
Ooh, put me on the spot. Yeah.
Okay. So if we know that, and I agree.
Here's the thing. If he's not done, if he isn't actually retired, what are you going to wait another year?
No, you can't.
You got to use him now. He doesn't get younger. You know what I mean? So
100%.
You know, now again, maybe there is an argument that could be made that if you give him another year, if you give him WrestleMania 34 off, maybe that gives him even longer to heal up anything that could be going on with him, you know?
Well, so yeah, but you're still taking too big of a risk, though. Yeah. Well, but you know, maybe not. Well, because here's the thing, though. I think what they did last year, they put over the guy they wanted to put over. That made a lot of sense, and they left it open-ended. They left it to the point where maybe he doesn't come back, and that's okay because we left it the way we left it. Let's see how he feels next year, and let's find out. And then obviously if they had to wait another year, and then the next year because at the end of the day, they did leave it in such a way that makes you wonder. I mean, was that his retirement? They didn't set it up that way ahead of time, so it made it very difficult for us to go into it. I just think at this point, Nick, it's 100% what they want to do. I think they want to give The Undertaker the opportunity to come back and push it as his last match, because then you kind of get the double dip a little bit. You get what you had with Roman Reigns. You gave him that big push as going over, and you left it open-ended. So if Undertaker feels good enough when it's his time to come back around, you can then go back to the well one more time and push it as his final match. However, if that's the case, Nick, I think he needs to go over. And B, it needs to be a guy, he needs to face a guy that is somewhat inconsequential. Like, it's inconsequential, the outcome of that match. It doesn't need to be a Roman Reigns figure. It needs to be a John Cena figure. I mean, does not matter who wins that match. It's just the dream matchup that we didn't get to see, that we want to see, that we finally get to see. And now whoever wins, it doesn't really matter. You assume John Cena lays down for The Undertaker. That's my thoughts. I think at this point it's got to be an inconsequential match that they build up. So it's got to be someone that's relevant. I mean, that's worthy of being the retirement match for The Undertaker, but it's got to be 100% inconsequential. So The Rock, John Cena, there's very limited options at this point, Nick, that I could see being that final match. I do think it happens. The question then obviously becomes, who is it? Who does it at this point? And everybody that we've talked about, Nick, tonight, we have a place for. If not at WrestleMania, for the most part, we also have a place on potentially Royal Rumble. The only person we have not talked about, Nick, and you just mentioned that he's returning, is John Cena. Now, The Rock is kind of that wild, we don't know what's going to happen with The Rock, whether he's coming back in any way, shape, or form or not. So he's kind of, a guy that could be thrown in there last minute. But what the hell do you do with John Cena right now when he returns? Unless he's on the Smackdown side, I don't know what you do. Where does he fit in on the Raw side? Where does he fit in at the Rumble? Where does he fit in at WrestleMania? Unless it's against The Undertaker. I don't see it. I think that I would put my money on that. I mean, if I had the money and it was legal, I would bet you right now as much as I could stand to bet you. I think that's the only, where else does John Cena fit in? And then obviously, Nick, talk a little bit about The Undertaker and what your expectations are and what your thoughts are as far as who he faces.
I gotta say, man, I think I completely agree with you. And
don't be so surprised.
Real quick, just to get back to whether or not The Undertaker will appear. If you remember, I don't know if you saw this, but Jerry Lawler, actually, on his latest edition of his podcast, he actually revealed that Undertaker was backstage at Survivor Series, and he had the following to say about, I guess he hung out backstage with Undertaker, and Lawler said, quote, "I think he might have looked too good.
Wow.
I think when you hang around or you show up and you look that good, they in the WWE, they're ready for you to come back. Closer to the time after WrestleMania, and I think I said that I believe we've seen the last of The Undertaker in the ring. Now I'm going to go back on my word. Just looking at him the other night, I think there's some more matches left in The Undertaker." So that's that end quote. That's what Lawler had to say on it. So that's sort of a glimpse into, kind of how it works backstage. Maybe he's sort of indicating that Undertaker wouldn't have been there if it didn't mean that he wasn't kind of trying to show off,
right.
Give the impression that he is ready and he can come back. But yeah, as to who he could face, who does John Cena face? And look, and we know what WWE does at WrestleMania. We know that WWE will book the WrestleMania match that might be John Cena versus The Undertaker, and wrestling fans like us might look at it and say, well, they may scratch their heads over that match. Why are you going to book that match? It doesn't do any good for who wins. It doesn't do any good for either of the guy. Does Cena win? Does Undertaker win? Does it matter? I think WWE doesn't look at WrestleMania like that. It's not about progression of storyline.
That's
it's about
true.
finality, and it's about the special attraction that WrestleMania is. So WWE, I think, would feel very comfortable saying, look, this is a big money dream match. It's John Cena versus The Undertaker. It's never happened before. It's at WrestleMania. Let's do it. And it really doesn't matter here what happens. If The Undertaker wins, then of course you can have all of that speculation as to The Undertaker's not done. He's going to have another match the next year. If Cena wins, you can really kind of play this any way you want it. I honestly think it makes the most sense because, like you said, Cena's been out. Now Cena is scheduled to come back to WWE for the live events that are taking place over the holiday season. So I think his first show advertised back is the show that's taking place on the 26th of December, which is the night after Christmas at Madison Square Garden. So that could indicate that his televised return will come, shortly thereafter. It could be at the Royal Rumble, could be before. But like you said, who does he face?
Right.
You're going to have him challenge for a title? It's not necessary, especially if he's going to take time off again, maybe after WrestleMania to shoot another film. It does. I do get the impression that WWE is slowly closing the door on John Cena as a full-time guy. And he's always going to be that guy that comes back for the company. He'll always wrestle that one more match. He'll always come back when he can. He said he will. He said in interviews. Now, so did The Rock.
So did The Rock.
And now we saw what happened to The Rock. Honestly, I think the way it works with these guys, if Cena's career is going real well outside of WWE, if it continues to take off, if he's landing more leading roles, and Hollywood starts to see him as sort of another Dwayne The Rock Johnson, another top guy, I think he'll be gone from WWE. I don't think he'll come back. I think he'll go right down the same road as The Rock. But definitely.
Well, which that means he will come back. He just won't be there as often. I mean, he'll come back periodically and get his big pops and obviously give back. But I agree with you. I mean, carry on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he'll probably give as much as he can.
Sure.
But if he ends up ever being in a place where he's like The Rock and he has that schedule, I mean, The Rock said he'd come back, but he can't do it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's movie after movie after movie.
Yeah.
So he can't do it.
Not possible.
So if Cena ever gets to that point, he won't be able to do it. But how does WWE book him then? Well, you can't. I don't think you're going to put him in title matches. I don't think you're going to put him in any kind of a feud that has future implications. So that's why I think The Undertaker probably makes the most sense. And they've talked about that before. They've talked about wanting that match, having that match, doing that match. It hasn't happened. WrestleMania 34, that might be, the time.
And I don't know that John Cena is there yet to the point where the grinding schedule doesn't allow him to do anything but one-offs and short 2-month spans or 3-month runs at the most, like we've gotten from The Rock. I think John Cena's almost there, but I do think that he probably comes back a little bit more to try to put some guys over when he's able to. But that's his job. That's his role. That's his role. Put over young guys that are already at the top at this point, just like The Rock came back to put over John Cena. Some guys that the people want to see John Cena, newer guys. Obviously when you're talking the next 5 years of John Cena's, we don't even know who those people will be. But in the end, that's his role. And then one-off matches that just make sense. Undertaker and John Cena surely make sense at this point. No consequence, like I said, to either guy. So, guys, before we wrap up, Raw tonight. Nick, what do we know about it? And we've already mentioned a couple of things that we do know. Braun Strowman and Kane, and then, of course, Cesaro challenging for the Intercontinental Championship against Roman Reigns. But I don't know. There may be a couple other things that we know about tonight, and obviously, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to the Shield in singles matches. We know that Dean Ambrose is taking on Samoa Joe. We know Roman Reigns is going to be facing Cesaro, and we know Seth Rollins is going to be facing Sheamus. I think those are 3 great singles matches there. I'm looking forward to that. I think, like we talked about last week, this build here is probably going to see all 3 members of the Shield facing Samoa Joe and the Bar in 6-man action. I think we're going to see that before we eventually see Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe one-on-one for the IC title. So I think that's the progression. That would be my prediction, at least, as to the projection of those guys heading into the Royal Rumble. Probably Reigns, Samoa Joe could culminate at the Rumble, or it could culminate after that, or it could culminate shortly before that, But I think that interim feud right now is going to be the Shield facing Samoa Joe and the Bar in 6-man tag team match. But tonight, you've got the singles matches. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm very interested to see what they're going to do about this cruiserweight title situation now that Rich Swann is out of the picture.
Well, guys, plenty to look forward to on Raw tonight. It starts up here in about 32 minutes. Guys, we appreciate you tuning into the Voice of Wrestling every single week. We'll be back next week as well for our final show before Christmas. So make sure you join us 6:30 Eastern time to 7:30, leading you into Monday Night Raw. For Nick Paglino, I am Chris Cash. This has been the Voice of Wrestling, and we'll see you next week, guys.